My name is John Santaferraro, and this is The Digital Analyst, where AI makes sense and digital dominance begins.
The Digital Analyst with John Santaferraro, powered by Insight Jam.
I gotta say that generative AI exploded on the scene 2 years ago, and it has been a boom ever since. But now, as the dust is settling and the hype is fading away, it's becoming clear exactly where Gen AI is creating value. According to a recent McKinsey survey, Gen AI adoption has grown from 33% in 2023 to 65% in 2024. Now, that sounds like a huge surge in the use of AI, but the truth is that the scope of use cases that companies have in production is extremely narrow. The majority of the use cases focus on marketing and sales, with 16% using Gen AI to generate content for marketing, 15% using Gen AI for personalized marketing offers, and 10% using Gen AI for product design. 8% for sales lead identification, and from there, the numbers drop off significantly. And not only are the use cases narrow, but the user base is still lagging. The McKinsey survey showed that only 39% of respondents are using generative AI for work in some way. Everything else is personal. So what do these statistics mean? They tell us that even though the hype around generative AI is peaking, we have barely touched the surface of the potential for what can be done. And I'm excited today about this podcast because my guest is Cindi Howson, and she is at the core of a generative AI use case that just might rock the world more than any other use case. It's the use of AI for analytics, data, and business intelligence platforms. Cindi Howson is the Chief Data Strategy Officer at ThoughtSpot and the host of the Data Chief podcast. She is one of the world's foremost experts on analytics, data, and AI. As a Gartner Research Vice President, she authored the Magic Quadrant and the Maturity Model for analytics platforms. Before that, she was most well known for the BI Scorecard, an in-depth analysis of business intelligence vendors used by thousands of people to make their buying decisions. Currently, Cindi advises top clients on their analytics strategy, and she influences the product strategy for ThoughtSpot. Most important for this podcast, Cindi spends a major portion of her time meeting with analytics leaders, understanding their needs and challenges, and helping them achieve great things with analytics and AI. And that's the topic of today's podcast: how to achieve great things with analytics and AI. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and join me on my Tuscan farm halfway between Florence and Lucca. Join me for the Digital Analyst podcast. A big digital welcome to Cindi Howson. Cindi, it's so good to see you. What a privilege to have you here with us today. Welcome to the Digital Analyst.
Thank you, John. I just wish I was really on your Tuscan farm right now.
Well, there's always a place here for you.
Okay, we'll get that scheduled.
Yes, I think, we've even talked about having some kind of a data summit here, right? I think we could convince people to come.
I think you could, definitely. I've been to Tuscany. I've been to Italy a lot of times, but Tuscany perhaps was one of my most favorite trips. Just so much culture, great wine, great history, incredible vistas.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I just want to sit back and learn today. I can't believe that you've been at ThoughtSpot now for almost 6 years. 6 years. And I'm so curious about what you've been learning. I mean, 18 years of advisory work, first at Gartner and then the BI Scorecard, 6 years at ThoughtSpot, spending time with customers, and 102 podcast episodes. Is that right?
Wow, John, you're more of a data person than I am. I don't know. I think, and you round up, I round down.
Oh my
So it's
gosh. Well,
5.5 years at ThoughtSpot. Every month is it's like dog years. Every month is and every year is like 7 years in regular life. So yeah, 5.5 years. And then the podcast, we were really fortunate that we had this plan back in 2019 to launch this podcast. So before anyone knew the pandemic was coming, we recorded the first episode December 2019. And so here we are 4 years later. And it's still, and we launched it in April 2020. So this is where my 4 year mind goes. And just a gift really to me, to many leaders, connected people while everyone was locked up at home. And just a privilege to serve the community this way.
well, I just want to do a mind meld so I can get out of your mind all that you've learned from that. Can you talk a little bit about what have you been learning? That's such great interaction with leaders. You have this interaction with customers. What have you been learning?
Yeah, I'm not sure we could sum that up. Like you do have to do a mind meld, and I do think this is one of the gifts of both my role and our industry is that you have to be a continuous learner and you look at all the innovation going on in our space. I mean, this morning I'm reading up on some new innovations that came out of Anthropic. Did I know what RAG architecture was 2 years ago? No, I did not. So it's learning the technology, but it's also getting comfortable with the fact that it is still people and culture and fear that stops organizations from embracing or truly leveraging technology. And I think when I was at Gartner, I would talk about culture, and I wrote about culture in several of my books. But I kind of thought, oh, this is the soft stuff, the Cindy, touchy feely, emotional stuff. And I underestimated it. And now I'm much more comfortable with no, this is serious business, and power and politics and people's mindset will actually really cause harm and cause you just to be complacent at a time when the world is just moving so fast.
Wow. So it's a lot more than just bringing in AI or generative AI technology into your organization. You've got to, if you want people to use it, you have to change the culture. What are people doing to make that kind of a shift?
Either change the culture or make sure that the culture is ready for it. And sometimes this might be a gross image, but I sometimes think of like a petri dish and put a droplet of soap in there, the way certain microorganisms would just scatter and it would propel it. Well, what you want is that you drop the innovation in there and people get excited, energized. They re envision old ways of working. And John, you and I had the privilege of meeting, whether it was 15 years ago or 20 years ago, I'm not sure, but I am often flashing back to the internet. And I actually left Dow at that time and went back and worked on my MBA. And my independent study project was how the internet would change the business intelligence landscape. And I think about, writing some of that over a dial-up modem that always dropped the call and thinking, is this just one big billboard marketing thing? Well, we know it changed the way that we connect with people. It changed the way that we do business. It changed the transparency of news cycles and who is actually a reporter, a trusted reporter versus a citizen reporter. And we are having this same generational shift with generative AI.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we had the big shift with the internet, and after that, we had a big shift with mobility too, when suddenly not only was my insight available to me through a browser, but my insight was available to me in my pocket on my phone. And now we're moving to the AI age where not only is the insight available to me on my pocket, in my pocket on my phone, but my business analyst, I carry my business analyst with me, and they can talk to me and tell me what's going on, and I can ask them questions. It's a whole new paradigm shift.
It is. In fact, I can't show you my live board, but I do start my day. I call it pre-gaming. I look at my ThoughtSpot live board every day. I'm looking at monthly active users. I'm looking at podcast listener stats, blog listener stats, things like this. And I do it while I'm having a cup of coffee. So I call it pre-gaming. Like, tell me what happened in the last 24 hours, and then I'll dig into something when I'm actually at my desk, ready to have more concentrated work, so to speak.
Yeah. So there's the shift in culture. You mentioned as well that it requires people, right? People have to make the changes. People have to accept the technology or not. What does it take to have people want to adopt the new technology that's coming, this new AI craze for analytics and BI?
Yeah, and this is where I will often so one CDO said to me, "Cindi, let's be honest. Culture is code for lack of leadership or good leadership." And I do think of one CEO who said to me so brilliantly that culture is the product that the CEO creates. Now, I do think it is the people that reinforce the culture. I believe it was Reed Hastings at Netflix, and a great book on this, that said culture is what gets you hired or fired. So culture can be kind of nebulous, but I do think that there's a framework that I use with customers when I talk about people change management, and I call it WIFM. What is in it for me? And you
Mm.
always have to think of each individual or business unit's WIFM and speak to both the head and the heart. So at a macro level, if I'm a retailer, the CEO's WIFM might be, I need to gain market share, improve operating margins, improve customer NPS. If I'm a data analyst, my WIFM might be really helping the business and getting to faster insights. It also might be, this is the heart, fear. If I embrace Gen AI, do they even need me anymore? But actually, this is where you have to speak to the WIFM. The data analysts, Gen AI is great for them because it gets rid of the boring, dumb work that just pigeonholed them to a dashboard developer. So I think it gives them more seat at the table. And so you have to start with the WIFM. And then the four tactics: communicate the WIFM in every media, whether it's a corporate portal, a newsletter, analytics days, and then it's incentives. And incentives can be swag, bragging rights. It can also be actually career progression. The third is the skills, giving people the time to learn and making it fun. So it doesn't have to be go take a class, sit in a boring class for 2 days. I love the way Roche, for example, did a hackathon, and they used soccer, or in your language in Italy, football data to gamify it. So, but making sure there's the skills, and then tribes, this sense of belonging. We can't underestimate the psychological impact of this. So it's tribes or guilds within your own company, communities of practice, but tribes in a larger scale. So do you want to be a leader, or do you want to be a laggard and saying, I want to run my business data driven. I want to be like these best brands in the world. So that's the framework.
It's practically perfect in every way, but I'm going to add to it because that's just what I do, right? When you said with them, I thought you were saying with them.
With them,
And
with them. Your tribe.
I thought absolutely. It's like, if I'm a leader, I gotta be with them. I actually have to believe in it. I actually have to be using it. I have to have testimony of how it's profiting me, how I'm using it, what it's doing. Because if I'm not with them, then I'm against them, right? So,
Oh, I like that. Am I
so
with you or against
yeah,
you? Yeah. Um,
yeah. So I think that's got to be really important. That comes out. It's just leadership integrity at that point.
it is, but think about what holds us back, John. So this is where to me always start with the why. And at least our industry in the last year has reinforced pretty much everyone is on the same page. You cannot have an AI strategy without a data strategy, and you cannot have a data strategy without alignment to the business strategy. If I look at something labeled a data strategy and it's really just a technology strategy, you've already failed. You will have put in modern tech, but you won't have had a business impact with it. So we get
Yeah.
too enamored with the technology and do not focus enough on the why.
Want more Insight Jam? Follow us on Instagram for exclusive content like a daily dose of best practices and buying advice from industry experts and leading solution providers. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel for long-form highlights from our expert panel discussions. The Solutions Review team is hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so don't miss out.
I mean, this just screams to me like a huge opportunity for anybody that's willing to embrace it. When I am trying to introduce change, or at least in the past, when I had people working for me, and I'm trying to introduce change, I tell people if this wave is coming and it's going to be a big wave, then write it from the beginning. Don't sit around and wait. You have an opportunity to become an expert and allow your expertise to surpass all of those around you, and you can actually ride this wave. It'll propel you. Don't sit around and wait. Take advantage of it. And you may not be able to. I think for listeners out there, they may not be able to master all there is to know about generative AI or AI, but pick an area in your particular area of line of work and become the expert about AI in that particular area. One area of marketing, one area of sales, one area of finance, one part of your industry. It doesn't matter. If you pick it and go deep, you will be perceived then very quickly as the AI expert, even though you just learned it. So it just screams to me opportunity.
Yeah, definitely a lot of opportunity. And you're right. Well, I won't say day zero because now we're in day two or year two, but everyone is learning this at the same time. Were there some people working with transformer models before fall of 2022? Yes, but not at the scale that we're seeing now. And this is where I often say we are really in the dial up days of the internet. Do we talk about AOL anymore? We don't. Now we're talking also fiber rather than token ring or Ethernet. The same will play out here. It's not a sure thing that the current leaders, OpenAI, GPT, will be the ones that will win the longer term LLM war. So I think understanding the opportunity and the technologies, it is who learns the fastest.
Yeah. I want to switch gears just a little. This AI enablement of analytics platforms and business intelligence platforms it's changing the way people get the insight that they need to make decisions. It opens the doors for more people to make an insight informed decision. It speeds the time it takes to get insight or to provide insight for those who need it. And as a result of that, every analytics vendor is now AI enabling their platform, and new vendors are coming out of stealth every month in this space. It's a little bit chaotic out there right now. What do you think of the chaos and the shift in the way that people are consuming intelligence and insight? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so it is chaotic, and maybe it's that. And I think of Matt Turk's MAD framework, And there are now over 2,000 vendors in his MAD framework, and that's a 42% growth year over year. So yes, vendors are coming out of the woodwork. Silicon Valley is fueling a lot of this. So, and I guess maybe because I have really almost a lifetime, 30 years of bringing order out of chaos and frameworks. How do you evaluate all these options? And I always break it down into strategic factors and feature function factors. And strategic factors, I will also say, even though companies are coming out of the woodwork, I receive at least a pitch every week for a company who will not make it. They do not have the business sense. They do not have the product market fit. They had one good idea to get started, and now they're looking to be acquired. So I always look at strategic factors and then feature function. Feature function, there are a couple things that are non-negotiable, and that is trust and scale. To go back to the days, old processes of extracting data, aggregating it into a subset, we cannot do that. And when I when I look at the way that some people are uploading spreadsheets to these LLMs, it actually does give me heart palpitations for that CDO that I'm like, oh my gosh, you're going to be a headline. You're going to be a headline. So it does give me heart palpitations. And the other thing, this is very hard to tell at first glance, but a lot of vendors that did not design for scale and natural language processing, they're bolting Gen AI on, and it really is like lipstick on a pig. And you have to think about the entire workflow and the entire experience. So there are profound differences. And for me, a couple of them I've played with, and it's like the marketing materials look great, and then you kind of test it, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to build a product than it is to build a demo, I would have to say.
Yes. Oh yes, definitely. I have learned that in the last 5.5 years for sure.
Well, so one of the ways I've been looking at the industry, specifically AI-enabled analytics platforms, AI-enabled business intelligence platforms, I've broken it down into four categories. And one of them is what you just described, the add-ons, right? These are people that had built business intelligence or analytics platforms, but they were late to the game. They decided when Gen AI came out that they should tack on Gen AI to their platform so that they could look like everybody else, but they really have very limited AI enablement and very limited automation within the platform. So those are the add-ons. And then second are the newbies. These are people who have embedded Gen AI in an analytics or business intelligence platform, but it tends to be business intelligence light or analytics light because it's impossible in a short period of time, and even 1 year or two, to build out an enterprise-grade business intelligence or analytics platform. And so the newbies have, flashy marketing, flashy Gen AI stuff. The Gen AI stuff tends to work well because that's where they've invested all of their money. So you can talk to an agent, but you don't necessarily have what you need to be able to run your business intelligence program. And then there's the laggards. There's some old BI and analytics platform companies that are very late to the game. There's little or no Gen AI. There's little or no use of AI beyond Gen AI. So limited automations, and those are the laggards. The leaders are the company, and I was fortunate to start looking at AI enablement of analytics platforms all the way back in 2019. The leaders are the ones who began AI enabling their platform 4 and 5 years ago. And so when Gen AI came on the scene, bam, that was set on top of what they already had, a core AI engine, a set of metadata, a semantic layer that was already AI enabled. And suddenly when Gen AI came on the scene, it was full power for the leaders because they had already been doing this for 4 to 5 years. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I like your framework, John, and I loved your white paper about this. It was thrilling to read it. It's always good to get validation from the outside. You know, when the fights in the marketplace, the competitive landscape get exhausting, I always say to the team, just spend a little more time with our customers. That is who I look for the most validation from. And I think of some of the customers who do speak publicly. I think about the great work, for example, that Elevance Healthcare is doing. Or in Europe, I think about the great work that Just Eat and OVO Energy, for example, are doing. But if I go back to your 4 framework, um, so the tack on, it's just not going to work. And I try to think, what's a good analogy here? Is it like trying to make a gas guzzling car an e-car? You just can't convert. You just
You know
can't
what it is?
convert.
It's kind of like those charge stations that are powered by diesel, right? You go out into the middle of nowhere and you have to you got to charge up your Tesla, and you plug in, and then behind the station is a diesel motor creating the energy to be able to run your car. That's what it's like.
Yeah, totally, totally. So that's just not going to work. Your second one, the newbies, it's so fascinating. And I love going to the show Big Data London because there's so many startups there and you see where the interest is. And even from September 2023 to I saw you there, September 2024, some of those newbies didn't come back. And a lot of these newbies started with text to SQL, which we know you do not get the level of accuracy that you need. And hallucinations might be funny with a recipe, and they might be not that disastrous with drafting a marketing email. But a hallucination when you're saying, show me sales or orders, on time orders this month versus last month, you cannot afford any margin for error. And even those founders of the text to SQL are now realizing that they just will not be able to make it work. As you correctly or were like-minded here, having a semantic layer that is kind of a translation layer, and then ThoughtSpot, actually, we add another reasoning engine, a ranking algorithm. But having that as the trusted layer between the SQL is part of the secret sauce for getting to accuracy and scale. And I find it so interesting that the newbies are now adding a semantic layer. Well, okay, we'll see how, and it cannot be. The other thing is our data has only gotten more complex. So a semantic layer cannot just be on one big table or one star schema. It's got to be on a multi-fact table, multiple dimension table, different levels of grain. And by the way, let's start bringing in semi-structured data as well. It's got to be that robust. And so the degree that they can catch up, I would be very surprised. What was your third bucket? Oh, the the laggards. I forget. They're never gonna. Yeah, just okay. They'll die. They'll either die a slow, painful death or a sudden death. We'll see. And then the leaders. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've heard some people are still using crystal reports, so maybe
Gosh.
there's a little tiny little life for the laggards, right? But yeah, they will be gone. Yeah,
Yeah, if
yeah.
that's what you want to accomplish, there's still landlines and I can sell you property in Florida if you really want me to.
Solutions Review is inviting you to join InsightJam.com. What started a few years ago as a social media event to celebrate enterprise technology has now grown into an always-on tech community with live events, discussions, videos, vendor showcases, and industry resources. Our vetted roster of experts, thought leaders, and analysts are sharing tips and tricks daily. So if you're interested in getting involved, join the long list of companies and brands who have already participated by visiting InsightJam.com today.
Hey, listen, I have to say I missed the BI scorecard. Um, and that when you were doing the BI scorecard, that was a highlight to always see what was in it, and I love the way that you were approaching it. I think it's time for an AI scorecard. And
Yes.
I,
Yeah.
I'm just, not that you have to go out and do it, but put on your BI scorecard hat for just a minute. If you were going to launch the AI scorecard, what kinds of things would be in it that never made it to the BI scorecard? We live in a different world. It would be a different set of things. What would you add in? How would you approach it?
Yeah, and for sure. So I would call it the Gen AI scorecard because I think we have to differentiate between traditional machine learning, which is proven, and we know the strengths and the limitations of that, and then the Gen AI scorecard. So I definitely would, and so I do actually have this, but not published. But I'll use this with customers and I'll say, take a look at this. These are the things that I want you to evaluate. And so some of it we've already mentioned. Is there a semantic layer? Is there a reasoning engine? Is it using a RAG architecture to improve the accuracy? Can you coach the LLM? So, and can you coach it using crowdsourcing? So, just to take a simple example, I'm an American. I would call something potato chips. My husband is English. He would call it crisps. I do not want his coaching to contaminate my coaching. So, when do you crowdsource it and when do you say no, I don't want to contaminate that? Do you have human in the loop to give that feedback of was it accurate or not? I mentioned the semantic layer, but I want that semantic layer on complex data models. And then all of this should be applied throughout the entire data and analytics workflow. So that includes modeling the data, um, asking the question, getting an insight, explaining that insight to me, taking action on that insight, alerting me that there might be a problem, and then taking action on that problem, and then going back and seeing did that action lead to the desired result. So it's got to be throughout that whole workflow for everyone to embrace. So, this idea of AI for everyone, I think, is important rather than these bolt ons. Here's some Gen AI just for asking the question, just the first part. So that would kind of, oh, and then the other thing I would say is which LLMs, because the LLM wars are being fought aggressively. So I think which LLMs, being able to choose your own LLM, will it be the big LLMs or the small language models? There's a lot in flight and in flux right now with that. That would be the short list. What did I forget, or what would you add there?
Well, I have an idea. You're the expert. I have ideas. That's what I do,
Okay.
right? The what about this idea of adoption, right? Because I think of adoption as the promise of generative AI and analytic platforms. More people will be able to make insight-informed decisions. So, what are the features and functions that would be necessary in a platform that are really going to drive adoption?
Yeah, and this is where ease of use is a hard thing to quantify, but I also think ease of use and design go hand in hand. So we have a mindset, and our head of design comes from Apple and Pinterest, but the design team, they think about how having to refer to documentation or a help button is already a point of failure. The design should be so obvious what's the next thing that you want to do. And that to me translates to ease of use, all of which drives adoption.
Wow. Wow. Human factors, I don't know if they still call it that, but human factors have always been super important to software design, but it seems like with generative AI, it's even more important now as the user group grows, right? It becomes even more important.
Oh, definitely. And so that's where I think adoption, how you measure it by persona, is also something to pay attention to. There was one of the Gen AI newbies, as you would call it, that I was working with. And it's asking me for a schema definition. Well, a business user doesn't know what a schema definition is. So I'm like, okay, maybe their persona is really the data engineer, and that's okay. There's work to be done for that persona. There's work, Gen AI, for code development of code. There's work to be done for developers. But this idea of Gen AI for the business decision maker is really what I remain focused on. And it's the sweet spot of ThoughtSpot.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do when the next time I'm asked to take a briefing from a newbie, I'm going to tell them that I'm bringing a business user along who knows nothing about data, and if they can't use your product, then I don't believe you.
Or ask
'Cause
them, who are
yeah,
they focusing on? Who are they
yeah,
focusing on? Is it the business user? Is it the data analyst? Is it the IT developer? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, listen, I can't have you on my podcast without talking about your podcast, The Data Chief. So I'm curious, for the folks out there, what does it take to be a data leader today as AI is exploding into every area of data and analytics, right? Data prep, analytics, business intelligence, data science, data management. It's everywhere. What does it really take to be a data leader?
Yeah, and this is where I'm kind of chuckling because the way we even named the data chief, we didn't want it to be one specific job role. So these data chiefs may be the head of supply chain or supply chain analytics, or they may be a merchandiser, but they're using data to decide how to optimize the merchandising, the right product in the right time with no stockouts. So, and then there are a lot that do have the title of Chief Data and Analytics Officer or Chief AI Officer. But as we talked about in the beginning, the biggest difference is the best of these really do have a business first mindset, a value first mindset, and the technology is just the enabler. They understand the technology, so they have the respect of the technical teams that they also lead, but they are really about applying the technology for business value rather than the other way around. And I like how Randy Bean, the author of Fail Fast, Learn Faster, phrases this. He talks about defensive data leaders who are really the first generation chief data officers. That was about safeguard and protect the data, govern the data. I dislike that term. And the second generation or more successful data leaders are offensive leaders where it is about the business value.
Well, I like the distinction that you made that it doesn't have to be the chief analytics officer or the chief
No.
information officer. It could be the head of supply chain. It's almost like there's a shift taking place right now that was similar to what happened in marketing. I mean, there was a day when technology and analytics and data started to creep into marketing, and marketing went crazy, right? They went wild. And today in many companies, the marketing IT budget is bigger than the budget of the CIO. And in some cases it's separate. And so what happened in marketing will now happen in all these other areas of the business, whether it's supply chain, whether it's finance, whatever it is, because all of these areas of business are being digitized. We're going to see that same shift to where the data chief then becomes the head of that particular division or department. Is that?
Definitely. Yeah, and I think Zhamak Dehghani, the author and architect of the data mesh, why did we need the data mesh? It was because of the pace of business and the explosion of digital data. So the idea that you can centralize everything is too slow. So I think of the best data chief is really a master orchestrator and collaborator connecting the dots. And so I like this idea. Some people will call it a hub and spoke model. There's one there's one chief data officer. I won't say his name because we're still trying to book him on the data chief. But he's like, I'm not technical. I work with my spokes in each of the lines of business, and I really facilitate the enablement. And so I think this is the way we have to go. Otherwise, a centralized data team just becomes a bottleneck.
Cindi, what a pleasure to have you on the Digital Analyst podcast. I wanted to learn. I've learned a ton, and I want to keep learning from you. So thank you for joining. I want to say to all of our listeners, thank you for joining as well. If you want some more information about Cindi, you can find her on LinkedIn. Definitely go check out the Data Chief podcast. I'm guessing that episode 103 is probably under production or on the way. And there's a lot of great episodes to go back and listen to. That's one to put into your podcast subscription and keep going back to that. There's more about Cindi at ThoughtSpot.com. And so you can find out more about what she does there at that site. If you're interested in what I do, I'm at ferraroconsulting.com, or just find me on LinkedIn. It's the best way to connect. And if you enjoyed the podcast, just like and subscribe down below. And I can't wait to see you in another 2 weeks for the next episode of The Digital Analyst. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. It's been so fun discussing with you. And next time we'll do it in person over a glass of wine.
Here in Tuscany. Sounds good to me.
Definitely.